thank you for accepting the invitation for us to get together and talk. And I gave a little bit of an introduction already, but why don't we start with your experience of diversity that happened when you were growing up. You were talking about Jersey City as being one of the most diverse communities maybe in the United States.
Yes.
And yet there wasn't a lot of warm happiness there of we're all one experience. So I was just curious if you could start there.
Well, I think firstly, hi everyone. Jersey City is one of the most diverse cities in America, and I think one of the things there is an overall blending that happens, but then there's also like this natural kind of separation that people do based on different things. So different parts of the cities are very segmented. So while we're all there together, and I think that Jersey City is a great environment for me to have grown up to see and embrace the world, but it also allowed me to see the way that we as people naturally kind of lean towards people who are more similar to us.
And you were talking about your experience too of maybe not feeling like I belonged.
Yes. So I had a very specific upbringing in Jersey City. So I grew up on the south side of Jersey City, but I always went to schools. I had the opportunity to go to some really lovely schools in the city where a lot of my classmates were not familiar with Jersey City as a whole. So I think it kind of gave me a well-rounded kind of view on how people in the city interacted with each other or didn't interact with each other. So one of the things that I noticed was, people just kind of leaned into the people that were the most similar to them. And even though we all kind of touted this notion that we were from this very diverse place, many people were not really immersed in cultures outside their immediate culture.
Yeah. And you were talking about your experience of your parents being from Jamaica and the Caribbean. Antigua, right. And just that there was this sense that you didn't have that real warmth of feeling like I'm part of something.
So I grew up in one part of the city, and I had this kind of cultural identity that was a bit different from my parents,
yes,
and also a bit different from the people that I was going to school with or the people that lived in my immediate area. And then going to school, I went to First St. Patrick's School, which is a small Catholic school in my area. And then when I got older, I went to a preparatory school where it was a bit less diverse than the schools that I had grown up with. So I kind of always felt like I was on the outside and the inside of everybody else's experience. So
yeah.
I kind of felt like I was different from my parents, different from the people that I lived with, and also different from the people that I was going to school with. But I also felt like there was this weird, I also saw the divide because of all of these parts of society that I was walking through and kind of passing through. I kind of saw the divide happen in real time. Yeah.
I know as you went into school, into career, you got into acting.
Yeah.
And when we had our conversation the first time we met, and you talked about this experience on this boat and how interesting it was for you, I would love for you to be able to share as much as we can about that experience. So maybe you could talk about how you got the call to get even involved in this boat.
Okay. So I thought it was a cruise ship. So I auditioned for what I thought was a cruise ship, actually not too far from here, like around 56th and 8th Avenue. I went in, they said it was a boat, and they were doing environmentalist theater. So I was like, ooh, an eco cruise ship, that sounds great. And so I went to the audition, and it was kind of not set up like a traditional audition. They kind of did like a little interview process, and I recognized one of the people behind the table, and she was like, girl, this is weird. I've done this before. It's so weird, but you have to do it. Just trust it. So she didn't really really give. They don't really like with this particular theater company. They do a very good job of kind of sharing the need to knows, but I didn't realize what it truly was, which is like it's so hard to even put into words, but it's like a community of international volunteers and actors and performers and people who work on ships who actually join together to do shows about environmental justice and also social justice. And so that part, which is at the core of everything that they do, that part was not as clear to me when I first went in, but I just thought, okay, this is eco-friendly, this is a cruise, and then upon learning more and more, it kind of, they uncovered what it was truly like, which was this magical and weird experience that I guess we're gonna get into.
Oh, yes, we are. So before we get too far into the experience, I was curious about the initial challenges that you had with getting on board. And,
Okay.
yeah, why don't you start there?
Okay, I guess I got the call. I auditioned in January, and I think the ship we sailed, or maybe I auditioned in December, and we went for sailing in March. So we spent the first month kind of docked at a space in Nanaimo, BC. So I arrive and I'm thinking, I'm going on a cruise ship. It's a little weird, but it's a cruise ship. It's an eco cruise ship. So this is great. So I show up the first day and it's like a giant pirate ship. So I was like, okay, this is not my boat. So I'm looking in the dock. I'm like, where's my boat? And this is my boat. So I walk on the boat, I get on the boat, and although, everybody that comes onto the ship comes in with a different job, so we did have a person aboard who was a chef, but she happened to be off that day. And so one of the crews were sharing a meal with everyone. So it kind of looked a little bit like gruel. Sorry if Paul and Nons are on the line. And I was like, oh my gosh, I am in the middle of the Pacific Northwest eating gruel on a boat with a bunch of hippies. This is not an eco cruise ship. And so that's how, little by little, it started to uncurl what this really was, which was just a community of interdependency that has been cultivated by, some really long time, like lifelong activists. And yeah, it was a very strange space for me because I felt like I was like the least likely person on the boat to be on the boat. So when I looked around, everybody had like markers of, being, I guess, alternative. And I was, thinking that I was doing an eco cruise. And so, I felt like I felt more out than I had in previous situations. But they were very welcoming and very patient, and also allowed me the space to be myself within that group.
So that's where in a minute, we're gonna get into that. Okay. But why don't we have a little interlude here of where, just because you probably, the sun started to come out a little bit early on, and we're gonna get to there, but kind of starts out a little black and white, and now then there's some colors that comes later. So how does the color start happening for you?
Well, firstly, the whole experience for me was about breaking down a lot of fears that I had. So a lot of the others, they had, spent their time, they were hardcore environmental activists. And, we were drawn to each other because I had done some social activism, but I had never been out in the wilderness. I had never lived on a boat. I can't swim. I don't drive a car. I'm from Jersey City. And, there were all of these different things that kind of all of these fears that I had about like trusting people that I hadn't met before, and also living on the boat. And there was just
in close quarters,
in very close quarters, very close quarters. So there was just an energy of support and non-judgment where I was allowed to just be a person trying. And that kind of allowed me to become more comfortable more quickly. One of the things, so this was, okay, I'm gonna try to say, because it's hard to
Oh,
explain what it is
absolutely.
without explaining what it
Yeah,
is.
yeah.
So we were aboard for an environmentalist circus theater on a boat where all of the cast, all of the performers were also working aboard the boat and volunteering to present these shows to communities in the Pacific Northwest, namely in British Columbia and through Washington State. So our show was called The Nomadic Tempest, and I was also playing a villain. I was playing a swallowwort. So these shows take place in these futuristic dystopian societies that are to serve as a warning as what could happen to our society if we continue to abuse the waters, the airs, and the land and the earth. So my role had me performing at the top of the truss, which was like super, I don't even remember what they say, they do meters. It was like more than 30 meters in the air.
That's pretty high.
And I am afraid of heights. I also can't swim. And just the manner in which they I've always felt like, I felt very comfortable to be afraid. Which made me eventually kind of feel comfortable to face that fear and to like work through it.
Wow.
And I feel like they just made, I don't know, they just created this community out of allowing people to just to be themselves and work through things and be a part of the community in the way that they showed up.
And so as I was talking a little earlier, sometimes there's tension in communities, especially when you're really close together. You can be irritating, and it's hard to make that kind of space. I was curious if there's ways that they operated, the things that they did that created the mechanisms or the methods, or maybe just the way people were. What was it that made people be able to get over the conflicts that they had with each other?
We had extremely open communication. So we had to, there was many different cultural differences, people from vastly different societies, countries, socioeconomic statuses, races. It was extremely diverse, and people were coming with all of their different life experiences and their different notions depending on where they are in the world about each other. And we just had very open communication where people felt comfortable to be curious about each other, but also not just like empty curiosity that's satiated like once you know something, but it's also like the willingness to be immersed in someone else's experience. So we shared pieces of our culture, and we really sought to understand each other from the inside out. And I think it created another culture, like a culture that was just for us, like our boat culture. So we all brought in bits and pieces of who we are and all of our life experiences and where we come from. But then we also had boat culture that was cultivated out of living on a floating commune, and very simply, and everybody putting in physical work and also creative work to create something that we thought was important.
Another dimension of this boat had to do with the leaders, because I thought that how you've described how the leaders operated in that setting was a really good example for us. So do you want to talk a little bit about Paul and Nans?
Yes. So Paul and Nans, they were a part of the founding group of the Caravan, which was always kind of centered around activism in
back in the 70s.
In the 70s, and it used to be horse-drawn, and they would bring the Caravan, which is always a circus theater. We had like a didgeridoo player, aerialist, and a swallowwort, which is one of the many made-up terms. And they would bring the show, and it was all like with volunteers and just actors kind of pooling their resources, and they would bring the show along the coast of the Pacific Northwest. And then I think in the 90s, a little bit over 30 years ago, over 30 years ago, they built the Amarzi. So all these people that had been
ship,
from around the world, everyone came in and built pieces. So there's pieces of the boat that I built, and I never build. I never hit a hammer before I went to the MRZ, but everyone was kind of everyone that has been on the journey. Whether there's some people that do it year and year and year after year, and there's some people that are people that just come and go. Everyone add something to it. And so, yeah, so they've been kind of cultivating community with people, just from all around the world. And they have a really good way of identifying openness in people. And I think that's like the one common thing that everybody that does something like that has is like the openness and the willing to trust others, the willingness to trust others.
So that's the some of the ingredients that help them.
Yeah.
And it sounds like the way that they did leadership too was very light. They had a light touch.
They were very hands-off. I mean, I'm sure they knew, because they've been doing it for so long, so I'm sure they've seen like all of the types of reactions that you can have. But they had also a willingness to trust the people that they brought on. And they also lived on this boat, so this was like their home.
Yeah.
So they lived on the boat for many years, and during the time that I was there, this was their home. So the willingness to trust others with this space that was also their home
Which
and their
they had
life's work.
Their life's work, yeah.
And so, yeah, they were willing to trust someone that had never driven a car to learn how to steer a tall ship, willing to trust someone that was like, yeah, I'm not going up there. And they're like, you'll warm up to it. Trust us, And so there's just this openness and willingness to trust that existed in the community. And I think that was like the one thing that we all had in common, along with obviously a shared passion for, environmental justice and social justice. So.
No, that's great. So there was a time that you said that you had a sense of belonging.
Yeah.
Do you remember how that happened for you? If there was
I think it happened like immediately. I mean, I thought they were nuts. I thought everybody, I was like, I woke up every day thinking like, wow, I am like in the middle of nowhere with all these folks. But little by little, and not even little by little, it was almost immediately a sense of support and belonging. So it was just like I think we had no choice but to rely on each other. Because
so relying on each other made a big difference.
Yes, so it's a communal experience, so everyone everyone brought something, a skill to the table. About half of us were also performers, but people were allowed to kind of find the space on the boat where their gifts were needed, or where their energy was needed. And I think we all also really appreciated each other for what they brought to the table. And so there was just we depended on each other, because when you're living on a boat and there's 40 people on it, it's not a huge boat, and we're living also very simply but comfortably, and utilizing the folks around us and also appreciating the folks around us for contributing in whatever way comes naturally to them.
And you mentioned that you moved to Mexico after this boat experience, and you had a similar kind of experience of seeing that something that you learned or experienced in that boat went with you.
Mm-hmm. Well, I moved to Mexico in 2021, and actually I moved kind of impromptu because I was visiting and I met a friend that was also in the caravan, because the caravanners are all over the world. So I visited my friend Mimi's, and I met her community of friends who were also very similar to in what their beliefs were and what their values were to the folks back on the boat, and also in that they shared and they were interdependent as a community. And also what also stood out very similarly to the boat, to the caravan, was that everyone in the community came from such vastly different backgrounds. So people were from different fields of work. Some people, were very wealthy. Some people were artists and artisans selling their wares. But there was this very strong community that also functioned to support the lives of those folks. So it was like this. It was finding community or finding connections with and people without qualifying them. So I feel like we have a tendency in society to qualify people, or how much am I going to get along with you? Do we first look the same? Okay. Do we speak the same? Oh, you're different. Do we have the same interests? Oh, okay. So there's different things that people utilize to size people up, and there was an absence of that both on the boat and also within the community, and I felt like it was very enriching because then you got to sit in company with people that typically you really would not sit in close, people don't get the opportunity, I think, to sit in close company with people that are really different from them.
So now I want to bring you up to date because you start working with our congregation as our membership developer person, and you went to the retreat and you made some connections there.
Yeah, oh my gosh, somebody's here. Hi, Karen. So, so I thought that when I came into Fourth U, it was another similar thing. So that tells you something about me, where I really didn't know what I was getting myself into, and so I was like, okay, I'll come check out the service. I thought it was really, really interesting. But then I was invited to attend the retreat. And immediately, even on the ride over, I rode with Moni and fam. Hi! And it was lovely. We just started right off sharing experiences and finding and focusing on the things that bring people together. And I always admire, and I gravitate towards that type of energy. And that was the entire experience of the retreat. I felt like I had the opportunity to exchange with Karen and Liz and Melissa and all of the folks that were sharing, and we were finding all of these ways that all of these areas of common ground, but we were also having some really important discussions as well, and really important and often controversial discussions about our belief systems and the way that we show up spiritually and what that meant and how it differed from person to person. So that also brought me back to that space where everyone has this opportunity to fully show up as themselves, and then also kind of put yourself, in community with someone, and it felt very familiar. And that's what made me feel like, okay, you made the right choice. So, yeah.
All right, great. Well, time is escaping us, so I really appreciate you sharing this. And to some degree, we have here an expert on community and building community, which I think is just tremendous. And that I will give you the last word here in terms of just what you see as the potential for what can happen here.
Well, I personally feel like we're already set up for that. I think one of the things that makes a community, especially a diverse and pluralistic community, is shared values and focusing on the things that kind of draw us together, and also embracing the things that make us different. So sometimes when we focus on the things that draw us together, we tend to shy away from the things that make us uncomfortable and make us different. And I think because we all have such important shared values, and because those shared values are often like what is necessary to propel and to move the world forward, we have a great foundation. And I think we can continue to immerse ourselves in each other's experiences. It's fun, and it's also it's educational and enlightening. So
all right, well, thank you so much for doing this conversation with me.